Dr. Olle Johansson from Sweden, thank you so much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to kind of follow from what you were talking about on the dangers of EMF in on one's health or animal health or insect health. Tell me what you know.
Well, I mean, that would take months to go through, actually, because the knowledge is very wide and many papers have been published. Let's just focus on one aspect, the impact on the immune system. It seems as if, and the immune system does this every day, initially it reacts to the exposures with an activation, but over time it deteriorates and starts to leak, which is very interesting given, for instance, the hypothesis of a combination or association between 5G and COVID-19 pandemic. Did our cells actually leak and being exposed much more to viruses? We don't know, but it's a fascinating hypothesis.
So is there in your mind a correlation between COVID deaths and EMF exposure?
Not in my mind, but there are other scientists that say so, yes. But there is a working hypothesis and it should be investigated, of course. And the problem is that we try to start projects, but it's very difficult to find funding. I am retired from the Karolinska Institute and the Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm. And being retired, it is difficult to find funding.
But if you had unlimited sources of funding, where would you be directing energy? What type of research to you is paramount importance right now?
Well, I would say there would be three areas. Impact on bacteria. Few people know and understand that if you count all the cells in your body, when you have done it, more than 90% are bacteria. The rest are nerve cells, connective tissue cells, muscle cells, blood cells, and so on. But more than 90% are, and there are already very interesting studies being published about impacts on them. And also, of course, fertility issues. We know the decline in sperm cell counts, quality, motility, and associated with problems of getting babies. And then also, finally, definitely the impact on insects, particularly pollinators. There are very interesting studies, but since I'm very critical scientist, I would love to replicate, make them all over again to see could there be other so-called confounders that would explain the effects, or is it due to the electromagnetic field exposures, like from cell phone towers, cell phones, Wi-Fi, etc.
So do you feel that COVID is more of an EMF issue? Or do you think it's a virus, or do you think it's a bacteria? What do you think COVID really is?
I think it is really a virus-based illness, nothing sort of big from the illness point of view. I mean, we have had such virus attacks many times before, and of course concomitant with bacterial issues that could bring people down. But I'm very doubtful whether it has any association with electromagnetic fields. But again, we need to investigate.
We need to investigate.
Yeah.
And what about the vaccines?
Oh,
what do you think about the vaccines? What do you think is in the vaccines?
I think in the vaccines are vaccines, nothing more than that. And if you look on the Swedish panorama, we have not been able to document any vaccine-related harm or deaths. So that's not a big issue.
So there's no excess deaths in Sweden, related with the vaccines?
Yeah.
That is so interesting.
And it has been very deeply investigated by the authorities. So don't get me wrong, they have been very accurate about that. But finally they had to admit that they couldn't see any associations. So that could be different with other countries, of course.
It's so interesting because in the U.S., the likes of Edward Dowd have looked at the actuarial figures and have ascertained that there is a 40% increase in excess deaths in the vaccinated cohort of the working.
No, I respect that kind of data, but it's very different to Sweden.
So Sweden has been an outlier from the get-go. They did not lock down.
No.
They did not force the masking. They did not shut down society. They've done everything differently.
Yeah,
and yet their vaccine...
I am an excellent proponent for that, you know. I didn't change anything. I traveled inside Sweden, outside of Sweden, even as far as to West Africa. No problem whatsoever, you know.
And I spent 2 months in the height of COVID in Stockholm,
I know.
Enjoying the free life there. It was brilliant because it felt like normal life.
Yeah, and
it
we
was
read
beautiful.
about countries like Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand, and we couldn't understand. Actually, from a Swedish point of view, we thought it was like a media exaggeration. It wasn't true. It wasn't like that. But then we realized it was.
Oh yeah, I can attest to the fact. I'm Canadian.
Yeah.
I saw it front
It was like wartime.
It was like wartime. So when you look at the Swedish experiment, because they did things differently, do you respect the response that Sweden had to this?
Yeah, of course. Yes, indeed.
So Anders Tegnell charted a different path.
Yes.
And has had a different
Yes.
How would I say? The results.
Yeah, the outcome was completely different.
Are very much superior to other European countries.
Yes, indeed, yes.
So what vaccine were they giving in Sweden?
As far as I know, they had all types: Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, and so on. So they have used all of them. You know.
And no excess deaths?
No.
What did you think of the vaccine being rolled out? Did you feel it was sinister, or did you...
No, I couldn't say that because the Swedish population has been vaccinated, especially the elderly, many times before. So that's a common phenomenon. More or less every year, elderly are exposed to different vaccines for influenzas. So that wasn't anything new, really.
So interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So did you get the vaccine?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yeah.
And
I think I've got 5 shots, and I'm still pretty normal.
Well, how interesting, because I would say at this conference, you're an unusual specimen.
Oh, yeah, indeed, yes, yeah.
So interesting. Yeah. So you're not feeling any negative effects?
No, nothing.
But you had your vaccines in Sweden?
Yeah.
So do you think there might be a country difference? Because we're seeing excess deaths in Canada.
This is a very sensitive issue to discuss, really. But for instance, when I look upon the side effect registry in the United States, reporting less than 1% of all the side effects, that's not the registry, that's a joke. You cannot use that for anything, you know.
No.
But in Sweden, we have an excellent registry system, and based upon that, no side effects that you need to bother about.
So that makes me wonder if there's not a difference in the vaccine in your country. Because why in our country is there such horrific injury and the data is being messed with?
Or maybe the Swedish Vikings are stronger.
Why is it that the Swedes are maybe not being affected by the vaccine?
And of course,
and you made an interesting comment, so share with me again.
It is, of course, impossible to know, but the differences between Sweden and, for instance, Canada, the United States, and other countries, it's huge, of course. There are so many so-called confounders, other type of factors. And one thing that always strikes me when I go, for instance, to the US is the enormity in the chemical exposures which you feel when you enter a restaurant or a food store. And I always smile to myself when I see the cereals for children that they could buy green, pink, purple. In Sweden, you cannot. No cereal is pink, purple, or green, but in the US they are. And that's because they have been treated and painted with color that could easily cause, for instance, colon cancer.
So really, perhaps North Americans have been exposed at very toxic levels to chemicals and thus reducing our...
Swedes were also exposed to a lot of chemicals when I was a kid, and that's a long time ago. There were a lot of chemicals around in society, but they are completely forbidden since many years back. So hopefully the coming generations will have a better and better health. And that's what you see in Sweden also, that for various illnesses, either the incidence is flat, meaning no extra cases over time, or the public health is actually improving. Swedes get better and better from that point of view, except for one factor actually, and that's the mental health of young people, especially young women and young girls, which is deteriorating, and it is heavily discussed at the governmental and parliamentary level, as well as the public health authorities, and they are keeping track of it. And of course, here we have other confounding factors like the internet and social media exposing people to content that is not favorable for their mental health.
So you have a mental health crisis
well,
with the younger...
crisis.
But heavy use of antidepressants or issues with suicide, or what is it?
No, it's too much to say crisis, you know, but we need to keep an eye on it and act and react in time. And people are doing it, you know. But for all the others, Swedes are getting more and more healthy.
So one question I have for you, Anders Tegnell, your lead epidemiologist during COVID, his rationale for not locking down the country was to allow natural herd immunity to develop.
Yes.
So why was it necessary to immunize everyone?
Well...
and why did everyone comply?
Yeah. That's very good questions. To begin with, the natural immunity and the herd mentality, as you say, that's very important, of course.
Yeah.
But then I don't exactly know why they decided to inoculate the population, but it's on a free basis. I mean, if you don't want to, you don't have to.
So there was no...
no compulsory...
There was no compulsory unlike in Canada, where it was mandatory for healthcare workers.
Swedes are... You know, they are not afraid of needles. So they went and took the vaccines because they felt it was a safe option. And it proved to be right. There are no vaccine-related deaths or anything like that.
So remarkable.
Yeah.
So what percentage of the population do you believe?
I think the last figure I saw, if we count 2 vaccines or more, it's around 95%.
And they did that voluntarily.
Yes. Yeah.
Whereas if you were to take a poll in North America and ask people, the latest study I read, they asked people, why did you get the vaccine?
Yeah.
Only about under 10% said for health reasons.
Okay.
The vast majority said for work or for freedom of traveling.
Yeah.
So the rationale was not for health.
No.
They did it for freedom.
Yeah.
Or for, working, for sustenance. That is really fascinating that the Swedes would comply in getting this. An unknown, an unknown. Now you shared as well that you got vaccinated, but no one knows what's in it.
Well,
or do you know what's in it?
I'm not particularly interested, to be honest.
Yeah.
I must trust companies, authorities, and so on, you know. And in Sweden, since 1643, actually, we trust our authorities, stupidly or not.
Yes.
Only the future can tell. But so far, we have been on the lucky side.
Yeah.
And I have far more important issues on my table, like the dramatic reduction in pollinator populations.
Yeah. So interesting. Well, Sweden is an enigma around the world. Everyone, I watched Sweden very carefully during the lockdowns because you weren't doing lockdowns. And then I was intrigued to know that the Swedes actually got themselves inoculated when to me it seemed like, why was it necessary? So it's a very interesting phenomenon in Sweden. But you are one of the countries that seem to be adopting what I would call the World Economic Forum agenda of chipping people, chips in the hand. You're one of the top countries for adopting that, and people are accepting it.
Yeah.
Or is that true?
There are very few people in Sweden that are chipped, and that's more for fun, you know, no practical reason. And they cannot really use it.
So if they tried to push it on the people for putting chips in the hand for payment and such, would the Swedes push back and say, oh no?
People would say, oh no, and that would be fine.
That would be
fine. Because Sweden is, believe it or not, a democracy.
Yes. So do you feel as though the agenda of these World Economic Forum kind of predators, are they having success in Sweden in terms of pushing the population towards digital ID?
Not very much, I wouldn't say.
There's opposition then?
Yeah, there is, but it's not really an active opposition. People are just not interested. They are more interested in their kids, in having a beer with friends, going to the football or whatever.
So if you were to ask a Swede on the street and say, are you worried about central bank digital currency, do they know what that is?
No.
They don't know.
No,
Are they already using it?
Probably, yeah.
They're probably so they probably are so advanced that you don't need to ask the Swedes to do anything because they've already adopted the system.
Exactly, yeah.
That's interesting.
But you know what the Germans say? Die dummen Schweden, the stupid Swedes. So maybe we have caught ourselves in a corner.
It sounds like the Swedes are compliant.
Yeah.
And cooperate according to what the government wants. You don't need to fight with them. They'll just do it.
No, and this is such an important clue you give me because it points to what I think about very often, that maybe Swedes are less afraid and they are afraid more of real problems, like the traffic outside of the preschool for the small children and so on, and they don't spend too much time of thinking about terrible future options, and maybe that's stupid.
Well, the thing is that...
But at least they live a good life in the meantime.
Maybe in North America, we're very aware of what it looks like in China.
Yeah.
With the social credit program.
I agree.
And so in Canada, the resistance is coming from people who say, we want privacy.
Yeah.
So like the Germans, they like to use cash.
Yeah.
In Canada, there's a movement towards cash because we want privacy.
Yeah.
We don't want the government to be able to turn on and off our money or access to it. So, whereas the Swedes trust the government, would never do that.
Maybe that's good for you.
Yes.
But at the same time, the privacy point is important too, because at the other end of that scale, you have solidarity. Sometimes you have to stop the privacy and go for solidarity instead.
Well, we're getting drowned out. So, thank you again for your time.
Bye.